Syria is on fire once again. Over 1,000 people were slaughtered in just 2 days, the worst bloodshed since the fall of Bashar al-Assad. Women humiliated, stripped, and paraded naked. Christians, Alawites, hunted, murdered, and exterminated. This is not a civil war. This is a campaign of terror, a deliberate purge, and the man at the center of it, Ahmed al-Sharaa, the president of Syria, also known as Abu Muhammad al-Julani. Sharaa's rise to power came after the collapse of Assad's regime, brought down by a rapid, brutal offensive led by the Sunni Islamist Hay'at Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, an organization with deep al-Qaeda roots. Sharaa himself is a former jihadist, an al-Qaeda terrorist, a man shaped in the ideology of extremism. And now, with power in his grasp, he is showing the world exactly who he is: a terrorist, a radical, a jihadist, a man incapable of peace. We ask a question that the world cannot afford to ignore. Is Syria being led by a man who was, is, and always will be a jihadist? A man whose hands are soaked in the blood of thousands, whose leadership has ignited a new wave of terror, and whose very existence threatens the future of Syria and its people. Ahmed al-Sharaa, a name now synonymous with massacre, revenge, and jihadist terror. Let's break it down. It all began with a calculated offensive. In Latakia and Banias, Sharaa's forces launched a campaign targeting Syria's religious minorities. 745 civilians dead. The Alawites and Christians, seen as remnants of the old regime, were slaughtered in cold blood. 428 Alawites executed in what can only be called sectarian cleansing. Their crime, their faith, their identity, their history. The massacres did not stop there. What followed was a wave of brutal revenge killings. Sharaa's forces hunted down not just pro-Assad fighters, but anyone remotely associated with the previous government. 125 security personnel and 148 pro-Assad militants were wiped out. The execution orders, they came from those now in power, Sharaa's men. This wasn't any war, this was extermination. What followed was absolute devastation. Entire towns reduced to graveyards, families torn apart, and survivors left in terror. Regions have been plunged into darkness. No electricity, no water, no means of survival. The people of Syria are trapped, with nowhere to run. And yet, Ahmed al-Sharaa continues to masquerade as a leader of unity, spewing empty promises while his forces paint the streets with blood. This is not governance. This is genocide. How can a man who once walked with jihadists now claim to lead a nation toward peace? How long will the world sit back and watch an extremist reshape a country through fear and bloodshed? The world is beginning to wake up. The United States has condemned the attacks, standing with Syria's Christian, Druze, Alawite, and Kurdish minorities. A clear message to Sharaa: the world is watching, but words alone won't stop the slaughter. Will condemnation turn into action? Voices of reason are speaking out. The director of U.S. National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, saw this coming long before the bloodshed. She warned the world. She flagged the danger.
I shed no tears for the fall of the Assad regime, but today we have an Islamist extremist who is now in charge of Syria, as I said, who danced on the streets to celebrate the 9/11 attack, who ruled over Idlib with an Islamist extremist governance, and who has already begun to persecute and kill and arrest religious minorities like Christians in Syria.
I understand.
Why that should be acceptable to anyone is beyond me.
It shouldn't
is
be.
certainly
And
not
I
in our
understand,
interests.
and I appreciate.
Syria is under the grip of an Islamist extremist. A radical leader has seized control, and the consequences are already devastating. Ahmed al-Sharaa has proven one undeniable truth. Once a jihadist, always a jihadist. Syria was promised a new era. Instead, it has been plunged into the darkest chapter yet. How many more must die before the world acts? The question isn't whether Syria has a future, it's whether the world is willing to save it from the clutches of a man who was never meant to lead. This is the reality. This is the truth. The world cannot afford to look away.